So, South Australia is less than 6 months away from its next election, and a couple of people have been asking, what is the state of the race over there? What does it look like? What does it seem is going to happen? And a lot of that has been brought on by some incredible polling that we've seen coming out of South Australia for this race. And I know why people want me to address it, because looking at the polling at the moment in South Australia, it looks like we are going to witness the death of another branch of the Liberal Party. For those of you that aren't aware, South Australia currently has a Labor government, and it is led by Peter Malinauskas, a man who is beyond popular in the state. Recent polling has him at 70% in preferred premier of the state against the Liberal candidate whose name I am forgetting. Vincent Tarzia, a man who is so wonderfully unknown that he is currently coming third in preferred premier polling behind Peter Malinauskas and I don't know. So a wonderful start for the Liberals in their 2026 campaign. But anyway, preferred premier aside, the recent polling that has got people talking is from Demos AU, and it backs up earlier YouGov polling that has the two-party preferred vote in South Australia sitting around 66 to 34 in the two-party preferred vote. That 66 going to the Labor Party, that 34% going to the Liberals, which, if it happened, would be the second biggest landslide victory in the history of Australian politics, coming second only to the 69% two-party preferred win for the Labor Party in Western Australia in 2021 in Mark McGowan's landslide. But Mark McGowan had COVID and his incredibly popular response to it, basically shutting the borders of WA and preventing coronavirus from spreading within the state. Understandable why he was so popular. But Peter Malinauskas doesn't have that going for him, but he's polling as if he did have some enormous catastrophe that he was solving. But that really isn't the case. And I think this insane degree of polling that we're looking at really comes down to two things. The first of those being that Peter Malinauskas is an incredibly popular figure in South Australia. Anthony Albanese, during the 2025 campaign, could not get enough of him, was touring with him everywhere. And that is with good reason. Peter Malinauskas is, I would say, a different version of Chris Minns, who's more charismatic and practices better politics. Peter Malinauskas is a darling of Labor right, and he presents himself to the South Australian people as a pro-enterprise Labor premier, somebody who understands the needs of businesses, but also understands and stands for the interests of Labor in the state, Labor with a U, not just the political party. On top of that, his work in the health sector, which is really the issue that got him elected in the first place in 2022, trying to end ambulance ramping, working on new hospitals, new ambulance centres being built, working broadly on infrastructure on top of that, and also getting the AFL gather round to take place in South Australia. All of these things have given him certainly a popularity. And let's be honest, he's also just a good-looking, charismatic guy. So that's the first side of this polling equation, the success of Malinauskas to present himself as an electable, likeable, popular figure to the people of South Australia. The other side of that, the second thing driving that insane polling, is that the South Australian Liberal Party is just a cacophony of disaster, failure, and insanity, even by Liberal standards, which is saying something. I've mentioned before, and a lot of you guys have as well, and I've seen articles by like Kevin Bonner on it, is that we are currently in a golden age of terrible oppositions in this country, but across multiple parties. We have the Victorian Liberals, absolutely insane. New South Wales Liberals, literally in administration. Tasmanian Labor, one of the most incompetent organisations we've ever seen. But in that mix, we tend to forget about South Australia. And the South Australian Liberal Party is beyond cooked, I'm going to be honest. You have to understand the South Australian Liberals. They were out of power for 16 years, up until 2018, when Stephen Marshall finally won the Liberals an election, got in, had his 4 years. Apparently it wasn't enough. And then in 2022, Peter Malinauskas came in, I would say, pretty much a landslide of its own, getting a 6.5% swing towards him and just blowing the Liberal government away. And things only got worse from there. So in 2024, after 2 years back on the opposition benches, I guess Stephen Marshall decided he was just done with it and resigned, retiring from politics overall. And in the by-election to replace him, the Labor Party became the first government in nearly 100 years in South Australia to win a seat from the opposition. The seat of Dunstan in South Australia, which had only ever been held by the Liberals since its creation in 2014, suddenly picked up by the Labor Party, a pretty big sign of support for the Malinauskas government. Now, in the time between 2022 and 2024, when Marshall resigned and gave up his seat, a man named David Spears had been the leader of the Liberal Party and the leader of the opposition. But in 2024, his seat was also contested in a by-election because he had to resign. David Spears, the man who had been opposition leader for 2 years, leader of the Liberal Party, he resigned allegedly for personal reasons, but then it turned out he actually had a criminal charge against him for supplying cocaine. Yes, a leader of the opposition, or rather, he resigned just before the charges came out, but a man who was leader of the opposition in South Australia was charged after a video came out of him doing a line of coke, which he claimed was a deep fake, but they very much walked back, because this year he actually pled guilty to the charges and had to pay a $9,000 fine and do upwards of 30 hours of community service. So that's the leadership material coming out of the South Australian Liberals. And then the icing on the cake, in the by-election to replace David Spears in Parliament, the by-election in the South Australian Division of Black, there was a 13-point swing against the Liberal Party, and the government picked up another seat. Not only did the government in 2024 in South Australia manage to pick up a seat from the opposition, they did it twice, and both of them were former Liberal leaders' seats. That's got to be a record. So anyway, Vincent Tarzia is there to pick up the pieces and try to lead the Liberal Party, half bleeding and crippled, to the 2026 election, where it is possible that the Liberal Party in South Australia will suffer the second, if not potentially, if the polling is somehow off a little bit, worst defeat in the history of Australian politics. Anyway, I hope that explains things. I could go more into depth about like the insane factional drama of the far right trying to seize control in South Australia, but I think really on the face of it, the reason that the polling is as insane as it is in South Australia at the moment is because Peter Malinauskas, very popular, well-liked, centre-left to centre-right figure who has an appeal to pretty much everyone in South Australia. And the comparison is a party where literally drug fiends have run the Liberals and just destroyed the party's reputation. So we're less than 6 months away from this election happening in South Australia. And I don't know what the campaign's really going to look like once it kicks off, but I can guarantee you when the results start coming in, we are going to witness a historic beatdown of what is left of the South Australian Liberal Party.